Welcome back to our series on the Ottoman Empire. In our last episode, we saw Murad I-Sakur, Ottoman dominance in the Balkans, only to fall at the Battle of Kosovo. Now, the empire passes to a ruler known for his speed, ambition, and terrifying power. A man feared across Europe and Asia, known to history as Bayezid I, Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. This is the story of rapid conquest, unchecked ambition, and a catastrophic clash that nearly destroyed the Ottoman Empire. Bayezid became sultan in 1389, right on the battlefield of Kosovo. He was a man of action, seeing hesitation as weakness. His first move was ruthless but decisive. To prevent a civil war, he had his own brother executed. This brutal practice would become a dark tradition in Ottoman succession, but it secured his throne instantly. From day one, Bayezid ruled as a man in constant motion. He earned the nickname Yildirim, or Thunderbolt, for his lightning-fast military campaigns. While previous rulers advanced with caution, Bayezid struck his enemies before they even had time to prepare. His armies marched at speeds Europe had never seen, conquering cities before alliances could even be formed. This incredible speed became his greatest weapon. With his power secure, Bayezid swept through the Balkans. Serbia was defeated and turned into a vassal state. Bulgaria was fully conquered. Wallachia and Bosnia were forced to submit, paying tribute and providing soldiers for the Ottoman army. Within just a few years, the entire Balkan region was firmly under Ottoman control, and the wave of panic began to spread across Europe. Next, Bayezid set his sights on the ultimate prize, Constantinople. The ancient Byzantine capital was now completely surrounded by Ottoman territory. He built a massive fortress along the Bosphorus Strait, cutting off the city's trade and supplies. For the first time, Constantinople faced total isolation. The city only survived because Bayezid was constantly called away to fight on other fronts. But the message was clear. The end for Byzantium was near. In 1396, a coalition of European powers, including French knights and Hungarian forces, launched a massive crusade to stop the Ottoman advance. They met Bayezid's army at the Battle of Nik. The European knights, full of pride and arrogance, charged headfirst into the disciplined Ottoman lines. The result was an absolute disaster for the Crusaders. Their army was crushed, and thousands were killed or captured. After Nicopolis, Europe finally understood a terrifying truth. The Ottomans were the most powerful military force on the continent. By the end of the 14th century, Bayezid ruled a vast empire stretching from the borders of Hungary to the heart of Anatolia. No European army could challenge him. No Balkan ruler dared to resist. Bayezid, the Thunderbolt, believed his empire was invincible. But a new storm was gathering, not from the west, but from the east. Far across Asia, another legendary conqueror had risen. His name was Timur, known in the West as Timur. Timur had built his own massive empire, crushing kingdoms across Central Asia and Persia. His armies were disciplined, battle-hardened, and unimaginably large. Both Timur and Bayezid saw themselves as the supreme ruler of the Muslim world, and a collision was inevitable. The two titans exchanged letters filled with insults and threats, each daring the other to face him in battle. War was coming. In 1402, the two armies finally met near the city of Ankara. Bayezid, trusting his usual speed and overconfidence, rushed into the fight. But Timur was a patient and cunning general. He had chosen the terrain carefully, cut off the Ottoman army's water supply, and used deception to weaken their resolve. During the heat of the battle, some of Bayezid's Anatolian allies switched sides and joined Timur. The Ottoman army collapsed. In a stunning turn of events, Bayezid I, the invincible Thunderbolt, was captured alive. It remains the single greatest disaster in Ottoman history. Bayezid died in captivity a year later. In 1403, the magnificent empire he had built shattered almost overnight. His sons began fighting each other in a brutal decade-long civil war known as the Ottoman Empire. The empire's enemies rejoiced, and many in Europe believed the Ottoman story was finally over. But from the ashes of this catastrophic defeat, a new generation was about to rise and fight for the empire's very survival. After conquering the Balkans, Sultan Bayezid, the Thunderbolt, turned his gaze eastward, back toward the heartland of Anatolia. Unlike the crumbling empires of Europe, Anatolia was a fractured puzzle of Turkish states. the Beyliks. Bayezid wasn't interested in diplomacy or slow negotiation. He moved with the same lightning speed that earned him his nickname. One by one, the Beyliks fell under Ottoman control. Some saw the writing on the wall and submitted peacefully, hoping to preserve their status. Others resisted and were utterly crushed. For the first time since the Mongol invasions, a single Turkish ruler held dominion over most of Anatolia. This incredible achievement made Bayezid more powerful than any of his ancestors. It also made him dangerously overconfident, believing his will alone could shape the world. To command his vast, new empire, Bayezid believed he needed absolute power. He saw independent governors and powerful local families not as allies, but as potential threats. So, he began a radical centralization campaign. The authority of regional governors was stripped away. Military commanders who once led their own forces were now placed under the Sultan's direct command. The old system of land grants, which created a loyal warrior aristocracy, was reorganized to benefit the central treasury. Tax collection became harsher and more efficient. These reforms certainly strengthened the state's coffers and military machine, but they came at a steep price. Resentment began to simmer beneath the surface. Where his father, Murad, had ruled through consensus and alliances, Bayezid ruled through sheer authority. In many corners of his empire, fear began to replace loyalty. Military might wasn't enough for Bayezid. He craved religious legitimacy. He wanted to be seen not just as a conqueror, but as the premier Muslim ruler of his time. He pressured Islamic scholars to issue edicts recognizing his supremacy. He poured state funds into building grand mosques and supporting religious institutions, broadcasting his piety. But his aggressive expansion against fellow Muslim beyliks in Anatolia sent a different message. Instead of fostering unity in the Islamic world, his ambition created intense rivalry. To the east, another great power was watching. This rivalry wouldn't just lead to diplomatic tension. It would soon bring catastrophe right to the heart of the Ottoman Empire. In the east, the great conqueror Timur, known in the west as Tamerlane, operated on a completely different principle. While Bayezid relied on speed and shock, Timur practiced patience and strategy. As Bayezid sprinted from one conquest to the next, Timur was methodically consolidating his power, studying his rivals, and exploiting their weaknesses. He saw that Bayezid's new Anatolian empire was built on a foundation of resentful beyliks, forced into submission. Timur understood that a well-placed word of betrayal could be far more devastating than a cavalry charge. He knew that Bayezid's greatest strength, his speed, was also his greatest vulnerability. This fundamental difference in their approach to war would decide the fate of both their empires. When Timur finally marched into Anatolia in 1402, Bayezid reacted exactly as Timur predicted. He abandoned his siege of Constantinople and rushed his army eastward to confront the invader. His troops marched fast, too fast. They crossed Anatolia at a punishing pace, leaving them exhausted and their supply lines stretched thin. Timur, meanwhile, was in no hurry. He waited, letting Bayezid come to him. He carefully chose the battlefield near Ankara, a dry, open plain where he could control the scarce water sources. He prepared his positions, dug traps, and patiently waited for the tired, thirsty Ottoman army to arrive. Bayezid the Thunderbolt, a man who had always dictated the terms of battle, was about to walk into a war that he did not control. The Battle of Ankara was a disaster from the start. As the fighting began, the very soldiers Bayezid had recently conquered, the Anatolian troops from the beyliks, switched sides. They turned their weapons against the Ottomans, betraying their sultan on the field of battle. This mass defection caused panic. The Ottoman lines broke. Commanders lost control of their units. Amid the chaos, Bayezid fought with incredible ferocity, leading his personal guard in a desperate stand. He refused to retreat, a sultan who had never known defeat. But courage could not mend betrayal. The Thunderbolt, the man who had terrified Europe and unified Anatolia, was finally overwhelmed. He didn't fall because he was a weak commander, but because he had built an empire that was too fast, too brittle, and held together by fear instead of loyalty. The capture of a reigning Ottoman sultan alive on the battlefield was an event that shook the known world. It was simply unthinkable. Timur treated Bayezid not as an equal ruler, but as a vanquished foe, a trophy of his victory. The myth of Ottoman invincibility, carefully crafted over a century of non-stop conquest, was shattered in a single afternoon. Across Europe, a church bells rang in celebration. In the Middle East and Asia, rival powers celebrated the fall of a feared competitor. The seemingly unstoppable Ottoman Empire now stood on the very edge of extinction. The pillar of its power, the Sultan himself, was now a prisoner. Bayezid I died in captivity less than a year later, in 1403. The exact cause of his death is lost to history. Was it illness from the harsh conditions of his captivity? Was it despair? A broken heart from his humiliating defeat? Or was it simply exhaustion? Whatever the cause, his death created a power vacuum that tore the empire apart. Bayezid had never officially named a successor, and now his sons immediately began to fight each other for the throne. The empire collapsed into a brutal civil war, a period known as the Ottoman Empire. Brother turned against brother, and the lands Bayezid had conquered so quickly were now consumed by chaos. Across the Aegean, the powers of Europe celebrated Bayezid's fall and Timur's victory. They had been given a golden opportunity. The Ottoman threat that had loomed over them for decades was now broken, its armies shattered, its leadership in turmoil. This was the perfect moment to launch a new crusade and drive the Ottomans out of the Balkans for good. And yet, nothing happened. The celebration in Europe did not translate into action. The Christian kingdoms, as always, were plagued by their own rivalries and disagreements. They argued over strategy, leadership, and spoils. This fatal hesitation gave the Ottomans the one thing they needed most: time. While their enemies delayed, the sons of Bayezid fought their civil war, and the battered empire struggled. But ultimately, it survived. So what is the true legacy of Bayezid the Thunderbolt? It's a story of contradictions. He expanded the empire faster and further than any sultan before him. He terrified Christian Europe and became a legendary figure of fear and power. He was the first to truly unify Turkish Anatolia under one rule. But his relentless speed came at the cost of stability. He built a massive structure of power, but without the foundation of loyalty and consensus to support it. His catastrophic fall at Ankara became a defining lesson for all future sultans, a cautionary tale that would be studied in the Ottoman court for centuries. Power, they learned, was more than just conquest. The lessons from Bayezid's failure were written in the blood of the generation that followed understood these harsh truths with painful clarity. They learned that speed without loyalty only leads to collapse. They learned that centralized power without the consent of the powerful invites betrayal. And they learned that relentless expansion without patience and consolidation can destroy an empire from within. These lessons would fundamentally reshape Ottoman strategy for the next 100 years. The empire would become more cautious, more methodical, and more focused on building lasting institutions. In a strange twist of fate, Bayezid's greatest failure became the foundation for the empire's greatest successes. By the end of 1403, the Ottoman state was a ghost of its former self. It was no longer a unified empire, but a collection of warring principalities, each ruled by one of Bayezid's sons. Enemies on all sides, from Europe to Anatolia, prepared to carve up the Ottoman corpse. Rebellions flared up in cities that had been recently conquered. To most observers at the time, it seemed certain that the Ottoman story was over, that they would disappear into history just like so many other short-lived empires before them. But in the midst of this chaos, something truly remarkable was about to happen. From the ashes of defeat, the empire was about to be reborn, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Join us in the next episode as we witness the chaos, civil war, and ultimate resurrection of the Ottoman Empire. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.